to my studio. I'm Tim Packer.
And I'm Brooke Cormier.
And we're here for another episode of our mentorship series. And today we're going to talk about setting plans and goals for the new year. Yeah, so it was an amazing 2017 for you. Just keeps you up. Cameron said yesterday you're 65,000 now on Instagram.
65 and a half now.
You're gonna hit 100,000 before, and then it'll be 1 million.
Oh my god!
So
I can't even think about it.
Yeah, that has gone, so much better than what you could have dreamed of.
Yes, definitely.
And then also the art and the sales and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a really great year last year. So why don't you tell me now though about you? I know there were certain things last year where you were just kind of almost reacting. You were putting out fires as people were coming to you,
Yes.
and particularly with the commission. So maybe talk about that a bit.
So for 2018, one of my main goals in general is to prioritize my time a little bit better, and that means getting to good habits and being more productive in general, because I found that throughout all of last year I kind of had a little bit of trouble being self-employed, just because sometimes I felt like I wasn't disciplining myself enough, and therefore not being as productive as I could be. So prioritizing my tasks, and what we said earlier about the commissions, that's kind of off the table now. On my website I've indicated that I'm not taking any more commission requests, and also on my Instagram it says that too.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just so that I can really focus on building up my own inventory, because right now the only painting that I have left is the 24 by 24 female bacon on a bun. That's the only one that I have left in my inventory. So if I have any hope of joining any art shows or art festivals, then I obviously need to build up a body of work. Basically just to paint a lot more, because I also felt last year as in last month, basically a couple days ago, that I was spending a lot of time doing other things, and I kind of felt like I wasn't even spending enough time in the studio. And I think that that's the most important thing for me to be doing in this coming year, is to just paint and do a lot of experimenting and try and get closer and closer to finding my unique voice. Because right now what I've been doing is painting. I feel like I've kind of when we started this back at the beginning of 2017, we were doing all those experiments and stuff, and that was really fun for me, but I feel like I also kind of just crawled back to realism a little bit, and now I feel like I'm stuck there again, and I kind of want to just break free out of that, and so that's one of my main goals for 2018, and also it's to just learn more of the business side of being an entrepreneur and an artist, because I just have no idea. I've never taken any business courses in high school or university, and now I've just been kind of thrown into this, and I'm what's income tax?
The good news is you don't need to really have any courses. I didn't either, and it is very much a kind of learn as you go. But I think you're in a really good position right now, because you're still living at home with your mom and dad.
Yes.
So
thank you, Mom and Dad.
Your expenses are quite low compared to if you were in a situation where you were living on your own and you had all these bills that had to get paid every month, or you're kind of out on the street. You can afford to kind of learn as you go. But the main thing is, you got to have more money coming in than just going out.
Yes.
And you're having that.
Yes.
But the one thing now that this will be your first year paying income tax off your art. Also, you had to do the HST, and so that, and again, that's one of those things you can just Google this stuff on the internet and kind of figure out what you need to know. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. But the business side of things though, and I think so you said there's a lot of other things that were taking your time last year. So in terms of the Instagram, Facebook, website.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. And I think that it definitely wasn't a waste of time.
No,
because
it was.
Obviously
it's an investment.
successful.
Yeah, it's an investment in building the business.
That's what it was, is to like, you know, expand my audience and just like advertise. And I think that like the amount of work and time that I put into it definitely showed results.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy with that. But I think that now, like, I'm obviously still gonna keep up with everything, and
But now you just have to keep watering it.
Yeah,
like, it's not like you planted a whole new garden last year, and now you just gotta water it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. So now, that's basically the most time-consuming thing that was taking up a lot of my time, and also just a little bit stressful too. But now that the garden is planted and I'm just gonna water it, I'll have more time to actually sit down behind my easel and just like get some stuff out there.
So when we talk about planning and talk about kind of, you know, and I like to do this every year, to kind of sit down, you know, kind of look at the previous year, look at what went really well, look at things that you would like to change going forward, things you could improve on. And then, so the first thing is kind of setting like broad goals or objectives, right? And then once you've kind of set those, then it's a matter of setting, okay, what are the things or the behaviors that I need to institute, or targets that I need to set? Because you can't, when you look at your goals or objectives, right, you don't have control over that. So if your goal or objective is to kind of get closer to finding your own unique voice, right, and that's a great goal to have, but it's not really up to you whether that happens this year or next year or in 10 years, right? So then you have to look at, well, what are the behaviors that I can do that are likely going to get me closer to that? And so then that's one of those things. So that is one of your goals this year. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of?
Well, like, in order to get there, just basically I just experiment and step out of the realm of realism for a little bit. And though like my realism paintings have been successful, and I do, like, going back to a long time ago when we talked about loving the product and loving the process, it's like in realism I really love the product. Like, after I'm finished a painting, I'm like, wow, I'm proud of this. It turned out really well. But then when I'm actually sitting down and like painting every little tiny meticulous detail, I'm kind of thinking like, do I really enjoy this? And sometimes, it's hard to get up in the morning and like know that I'm going, like, stepping behind my easel and going to like work on that kind of thing. So I think that definitely, in order for me to find something that I enjoy the process of doing as well as the product, I'm just gonna have to like try a bunch of different things. And also, like, subject matter has been something too, because, you know, I did the food thing for so long, and that was fun, and I liked it, and, you know, my audience liked it. But I'm also kind of like ready to move on from that. It's like I dug deep a little there, but now it's kind of, I wanted to move on to more like natural subjects, like landscapes or florals, or I'm really
still lifes.
Yeah,
like,
and
because
still life.
You're really good at photography, so setting up some really dramatic, like almost like the triple bogey, but like things with glass with a lot of reflection and light. I think you can have a lot of. It would be more challenging, probably, even if you're staying within the realm of kind of more realism, but that subject matter and that type of thing too produces the ooh-ah paintings that people go nuts over.
I really do like painting.
Because it's a matter of finding not only your stylistic approach, but your subject matter. And when you get the two, like, people ask me still, like, you get sick and tired of painting the sun coming through the trees? And it's like, nope. It's like when you find your passion. And your passion, you know, your passion is art, first of all, but then passion in terms of your style and your subject matter, it's like you want to become the best in the world at it. And you just keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And even though I get people say to me sometimes, oh, it's like you're painting the same thing, it's like, no, it's different, but I'm also getting better. And they don't see that, maybe. But I want to talk about the whole realism thing, about painting realism or looking for something else. And so I love this quote. This is from Zoltan Zabel, one of the gods of watercolor, who said this to me when I was kind of at the same position you were in. I was painting high realism portraits and wasn't sure, but, you know, was thinking, like, I don't know. So he said something that I think is probably the best I've ever heard about kind of explaining this. And so it's like painting in super high realism is a viable option, and it's a viable choice. But if that's where you end up, you want to make sure it's a choice. You want to make sure that you just didn't stay there because nothing else occurred to you. And then he said something to me that really kind of blew my mind. He said, wouldn't it be great if you could create your own world on canvas or paper that was unlike anyone else's? And wouldn't it be a shame if we never got to see it because you didn't even think to look for it? So that's, I think this, like, that's the perfect time for you to hear something.
That's my 2018.
Yeah, but because, you know, but you also have to realize you may end up go all over the place and then come back and go, nope, you know what? This is what I like. And it might just be a matter of finding the subject matter that you like to do. But it's kind of like, and when you go on that journey, it's not like you can find your voice. It's eventually your voice finds you. And so that's the whole thing too, is you just have to keep trying. Now the good news is, and I can't stress this enough, and we've talked about it, but you have such a high skill set, and it's improved a lot this year too, right? Like, you think of how much faster you are now, and just how much better your paintings are. It's amazing. Just the fact of putting hours in front of the easel does that. I can't remember where I was going. We're gonna have to kind of do it. Here, what was I talking about? So yeah, the good thing about having the skill set is that, you know, while you are trying to find your voice, that skill set is going to result in still a lot of fairly successful paintings, even though we know in process mode that, you know, some of them are going to fail or not. Again, the higher your skill set, the more you know about composition and everything else, the less likely, even if it's not one that is not your best or you're not in love with it, it still potentially will be a sellable piece of art. And so that's the thing I want to get out there to people that are watching is you don't start searching for your voice until you've developed the skills.
Yes.
So that, at least that's my recommendation. So the other thing I want to talk about too is the commissions. So you've put like an absolute moratorium on doing commissions?
Well, yes. I mean, I think that, well, just for now.
Yeah.
Because the fact that the paintings that I have made that weren't commissions, basically all of them have sold.
Yeah.
That kind of gives me reassurance that, like, no matter what I produce, like, hopefully someone's gonna buy it.
Yeah.
And if I can, like, kind of be making money off of just solely my own work and not, you know, commissioned work of someone else's house or whatever.
Painting what someone else wants you to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's pretty restricting on your creativity and
still good at building the skills though.
Yes, that's
some
definitely
of those
true.
Commissions you took were very challenging.
Yes, definitely. Right? Yeah.
So at least you take that skill set.
Yeah.
One thing you might want to consider because the whole thing too is so you spent all of last year mainly focused too on earning a living, right? So definitely. The whole you know, finding your voice and all that was kind of given second place to doing what was going to pay the bills.
Yes.
So sometimes you might just want to hedge your bets a little. So what I would say is, you know, when people inquire about a commission, I would say I'm not taking any on right now, but at least get their information. Yeah. And find out what they're interested in. And then also, probably what will work for you more this year, I think, is, you know, only take on commissions if it falls within what you want to be doing anyways, right? So it's like, even so as you start, you know, trying to find your voice, so you're going to spend time in process mode and you're going to be experimenting with different things, you know, if somebody contacts you and says, oh, I love that piece that you did, I'd be interested in something like that in a 3x4. Yeah. It's like, okay. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's because, you know, the one thing with being an artist is it can be feast or famine. Yes. And so it's always just a little scary, you know, when you just cut out something that's has been a good part of your earning. Yeah. So I would just say that don't turn people away for good, because if you turn people and say I'm not doing commissions, then they may never come back, and you might be sitting there in June going, Gee, it'd be nice to have a few commissions
Yeah,
right
exactly. Well, I have 2 commissions on my list right now. I'm working on one that's going out to Alberta, and then after that, there's 2 more. And then once I'm finished those, it's like I don't have any more commissions. Though those aren't on a strict timeline either, so I definitely need to build up my inventory before I start on those. But for example, one of them, this customer just basically said like, oh, I don't want to restrict your creativity whatsoever. Just make whatever you want, and of this size, and consider it sold. Basically,
So that's the kind of commissions that you like, right?
And he was a photographer, has photography is his hobby, and he sent me a bunch of photos, and he's like, oh, and here's like some inspiration, so like if anything kind of like sparks a little something, then go with it or whatever. But like that's exactly the kind of commission that I'm like, okay, like I'll definitely do that, because I'm still being able to like paint my own stuff. But
so actually, I do want to mention something about that. So working from someone else's photos, again, it's okay when you're doing a commission if you want to do the commission and they absolutely insist, like, this is what I want, then you have to make a decision. But there's important issues there for copyright. So even if someone does that, right, here's these photos, if you'd like, to do the painting on that, I'd love it. So you do the painting and he buys it. If you want to do prints of it, you need his permission.
Yeah, that's true.
And you need it in writing.
Yeah.
And he might want a piece of it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what I would suggest in something like that is when he says, here's things I'm interested in, is go out and shoot your own shots.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you get an idea of what he likes. And then because people don't realize that if any work you do from a photograph, the photographer has the copyright on. You have the copyright only on the painting, only if you have his permission to use that. So it's just always something to, because that's why I don't do commissions based on other people's photos. And sometimes, most of the time, their photos aren't that good. Yeah. But even if I see something that's spectacular, it's like, well, if I paint that, I'm going to want to do prints of it if it's spectacular, and I don't want someone else to be in control of whether or not I can do it or wanting a piece of it.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
So did you have any other thoughts of things that this year? I've got a few suggestions.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you, because since my inventory is so low right now, and then there's the whole art festival, art show thing, I'm not sure like where I should be like focusing my energy into. Like if the main goal of this year should be, because last year one of my main goals was to get into a certain amount of shows and to do a certain amount of shows. I'm not sure if that should be the same kind of goal for this year, if I should be working towards, well, I'm for sure doing like I'd like to do the Oshawa Art Association Juried Show again, and the deadline is in March, so I've got to do some painting for that. And I'm also going to be doing the Oakville Art in the Park.
That's a good festival.
Yeah, because since I won the People's Choice Award last year, I think that guarantees me a spot for next year, as well as like an advertisement or something.
I think in that one, if it hasn't changed, once you get in, you're kind of grandfathered in, and the only new spots are available as people don't come back.
Yeah.
So what I would suggest this year too, as well as kind of trying Marley. Karen, can you let her out? Sorry, our dog's being a bit of a pest here.
There's a squirrel.
What I would look at is resume building. And I mean, so everything's changing so rapidly because of social media and the internet, right? And you may not ever want to go into like commercial galleries or high-end commercial galleries, but you may, right? You don't know. And so resume building is a really good thing to do at the stage where you're at. And so that is in terms of like entering shows, but entering juried shows. So and I would say you should be looking at like the big shows. So there's things like the Society of Canadian Artists, the Federation Canadian Artists, the Ontario Society of Artists, things that are either regional, provincial, or national, and getting into. So you've already got into like local shows and you've won awards. So then the next thing is like you can get into national shows. That's just one tick further up. And then also with those organizations, there's jury membership levels in there. So, you know, for me, one of the things that was probably the biggest breaks I ever got in my career was being elected to the Canadian Watercolor Society, even though I don't paint in watercolor anymore. But I got to associate with so many artists who were where I wanted to be. And then I served on the board for 10 years, including a term as president. So I know you don't paint in watercolor, so that's not it. But the Federation of Canadian Artists, Society of Canadian Artists, and Ontario Society of Artists, those are all like any mediums. And it's the same thing. It's people at the highest level. So it's the ability to make more friends with and get information, not just from me, but from like lots of other people who are having successful careers. And that's also stuff that once you get it on your resume, that you're a member. Because most of those too, I think now it's like you can't, I think senior signature membership is kind of like the top in most of them. But when you apply, first of all, like you can only apply as an associate, I think, in some of them. And then, you know, if you get into 2 of their shows, you get to the next level. And then, and so it's something that kind of takes time.
And do the memberships, do you have to reapply for them? Or is it like you...
No, once you get that, you just keep paying your dues. So I'm still a member of the Canadian Society of Painters and Watercolor, even though I haven't painted a watercolor in a dozen years. But because that had such a big impact on my career, I feel like I should still support them, right? And pay my, but plus I'm a past president, which that list is like AJ Cassin's on that list. You know, you want to still be a member. Although I was elected a senior signature member of the Canadian Institute of Portrait Artists way back, I did not keep that up because that wasn't something I got all that involved in. And I don't paint portraits anymore, so that doesn't really matter to me. That's the other thing I would say too, with any of these groups, and it's still kind of down the road, but when you get in, then in terms of volunteering to be on the board, and because that's where you really learn and get to meet lots of people, because usually the people on the board are people who are super, super serious about art and about their careers.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
So I can give you a list of some of those if you want later. Just look into them, see what's required. And they also, like I say, they all have annual open juried shows. And so that's the kind of show you want to be getting into, where it actually just getting into the show is a big deal. And then it's kind of like, you know, if you're winning awards at national shows, then that would be pretty cool. Makes the price, just makes the value of your work go up, right? All of that stuff.
I think that is something that would be good for me to focus on, is like getting elected into these kind of like prestigious groups, and also just those kind of juried shows where it's not like a whole festival, but just like really focusing on like getting like one really good painting ever and stuff like that.
So other than that, that's kind of it for the year?
I guess.
And I think that's good. I think it's really good that, again, to have some pretty focused goals on what you want to do, and again, that whole thing of experimenting a lot with different subject matter and with different stylistic approaches is that's kind of enough to kind of keep you busy. And the other thing is, have you put a Shopify thing on your website?
And that has been on my to-do
so that's
list
on
for,
there.
that is also.
So the prints, how are the prints doing?
They're good.
They're doing good?
I think that actually somebody asked me the other day like where the most money is coming from, whether it's like the prints or the originals. And right now, I honestly think it's pretty even.
So that's great, because doing the prints, every original takes X number of hours in the studio. Whereas the prints are coming in without you having to create a new piece. Because I will tell you one thing, that so for people buying prints now, they have to DM you and...
it's basically like the best way to do it is through email. Like now I'm not accepting DMs on Instagram just because I've been receiving a lot of nonsense. So on my website you can like, there's a contact page, and at the bottom of every page there's a...
So I'll tell you one thing, when we went from having on our website where contact us if you're interested in purchasing a print, to having buy now, the sales went up tenfold.
Wow.
And there's all kinds of studies showing that every step that you make people take to go to actually get to purchasing, you will lose a lot of people. So
Makes
I would
sense.
say that probably is a priority
Priority.
in terms of the business side of things. Is getting your actual online store, your e-commerce up. So that, and plus that's great. Those are great emails. You check your email in the morning and it's like, oh, we just sold 2 prints. You know, like there's no, and also that also saves time out of your day because you're not emailing people back and forth. And then in terms of like payment, it's looked after. They can pay with PayPal or Visa or MasterCard or whatever. So it really streamlines the process and it will result in more sales. So that's something that
definitely need to get on that ASAP.
Okay. I think that's probably it then.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, short and sweet, but it's going to be an exciting year this year. This year's, I mean, last year really was a proving year, right? Proving to yourself, proving to your parents, proving to the world that this is something you should be doing. And there's like your total social media now is what, close to 100,000?
I think I have around like 18,000 on Facebook and then 65.5 on Instagram. So yeah, so you've proven to a lot of people who they also think this is what you should be doing. But yeah, this year is going to be an exciting year as you really look at developing and digging deep. Oh, I did want to mention another quote. I love when you get great quotes that are nuggets of wisdom. When you mentioned about digging deep into the food stuff last year, and I think because we've talked about that, Frank Webb, who's great, one of probably the greatest teachers of the 20th century, he had a saying that said, you know, at sometimes you spend time digging little holes all over the backyard, and then every once in a while you got to dig deep to see what's there. And so, like, yeah, this year you're going to spend time digging little holes all over the backyard, and I have no doubt that at some point something will just speak to you, right? Where you go then, okay, it's time to dig deep here. And then when you dig deep, it doesn't mean you're planting a flag and saying, this is me forever. It's kind of like, this is for right now. What just
I
like
want to do.
Food stuff.
Just like the food, just like me with the portraits,
like
me with the watercolors. And then when your ultimate thing finds you, then you stay digging there deep because that's all you want to do. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 years, whether I'll still be doing this stuff or not, but the only thing I can tell you is if it still continues to challenge me and excite me, then I will. And if it stops, then it'll be time to start digging little holes all over the backyard. Okay, so thank you for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, please subscribe to the channel, and you can see more of Brooke's stuff. Your Instagram's probably your biggest thing, and that's it.
Cormier _art.
Just if you just put in B Cormier on Instagram now, you're the first one that
comes
up.
Really?
B Cormier art.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.